Master your mind, and you will begin to master your life. That is not a slogan. That is not a decorative phrase you hang on a wall and ignore by Tuesday afternoon. That is a law. If your mind is weak, your life will be unstable. If your mind is scattered, your life will be scattered. If your mind is ruled by impulse, your life will be ruled by consequences. You keep looking at your circumstances as if they are the first problem. Many times they are not. Many times the first problem is the mind interpreting those circumstances, enlarging them, excusing them, fearing them, surrendering to them. Your life does not move only by opportunity. Your life moves by interpretation. It moves by discipline. It moves by the private conversation happening inside you when no one else can hear it. Think about that. The same storm can make one man panic and another man prepare. The same setback can make one person collapse and another person become sharper. The difference is not always in the event. Difference is in the mind meeting the event. If you do not learn to govern that inner world, the outer world will keep governing you. Now understand something important. Your mind is either a servant or a saboteur. It either carries your standards forward, or it keeps smuggling weakness back into your life. It either helps you build, or it quietly helps you destroy what you say you want. You cannot afford to be casual about that. You cannot afford to let every thought rent space in your head. You cannot afford to let every mood become an order. You cannot afford to treat your own mind like an open field where anything can grow. A field left unmanaged does not stay neutral. It grows weeds. A mind left unmanaged does not stay peaceful. It grows confusion. It grows fear. It grows resentment. It grows appetite without restraint. And then one day, you look around at your life and wonder why it feels overrun. Think about a garden after a long season of neglect. The weeds did not ask permission. They simply took advantage of the absence of discipline. That is how destructive thinking enters your life. Quietly, repeatedly, patiently. It does not always kick the door open. Sometimes it slips through the cracks you kept refusing to seal. Let that sink in. If you do not direct your mind, your default patterns will do it for you. Now let's talk about why this matters so much. You do not live only from your hands. You live from your thoughts. Your habits begin in thought. Your speech begins in thought. Your endurance begins in thought. Quitting begins in thought. Excellence begins in thought. The thought comes first, then the decision, then the repetition, then the life. That is why you can change neighborhoods and still carry the same chaos. You can change jobs and still carry the same excuses. You can change relationships and still carry the same insecurity. You can repaint the room while the foundation underneath it keeps cracking. Master your mind, master your life. That line must become more than inspiration. It must become instruction. Because if your inner life remains untrained, then every external improvement will be limited by internal disorder. Think about a captain standing at the wheel of a ship in rough water. If the sea is wild, he must be steady. If he panics with the storm, the vessel has no leadership. Your mind is that wheel. Life brings waves, delays, temptations, losses, uncertainty, pressure. If your hand shakes at every wave, you will drift when you should be steering. Now consider the first enemy of a disciplined mind, passivity. You think because you are not doing something destructive, you must be doing something wise. Not true. A passive mind is not a strong mind. A passive mind is simply available. Available for fear, available for comparison, available for fantasy, available for laziness, dressed up as exhaustion, available for other people's opinions, available for every headline, every insult, every passing emotion. And because it is available to everything, it becomes anchored by nothing. You were not built to live that way. No one is coming to guard the gate of your mind for you. No one is coming to filter every thought for you. No one is coming to build your mental discipline while you remain mentally lazy. That is your assignment. That is your labor. That is your responsibility. Let that sink in. You must become an active participant in your own mental life. You must stop saying whatever you feel, believing whatever you think, following whatever impulse rises first. Passivity is expensive. It makes you a hostage in your own head. And a person held hostage by his own mind cannot build a stable life. Now understand something important. Not every thought deserves trust just because it arrived wearing your voice. That is one of the most costly mistakes people make. They hear a thought, and because it sounds familiar, they assume it is wise. They feel a fear, and because it feels strong, they assume it is true. They feel a craving, and because it feels urgent, they assume it must be obeyed. No, urgency is not authority. Familiarity is not wisdom. Intensity is not truth. A disciplined mind learns to interrogate thoughts before obeying them. Where did this come from? What will this produce? Does this move me toward strength or toward weakness? Does this align with the life I say I want? Think about a border officer checking passports. He does not wave every traveler through because they reach the gate. He inspects. He verifies. He evaluates. Your mind needs that kind of gatekeeping. If every thought gets immediate access, then fear can decorate the walls. Anger can sit at the table. Resentment can sleep in the guest room. And self-pity can start calling the place home. Think about that. Most mental chaos is not caused by one catastrophic idea. It is caused by a lack of inspection at the entrance. Now let's talk about emotion, because many lives are mismanaged, not by wicked intentions, but by untrained feelings. Emotion is real, but emotion is not a ruler. Emotion is information, but it is not instruction. You feel tired, but that does not automatically mean stop. You feel afraid, but that does not automatically mean danger. You feel discouraged, but that does not automatically mean quit. You feel offended, but that does not automatically mean speak. There are too many people being led around by whatever feeling shouts the loudest. And then they wonder why their lives lack consistency. Of course they do. A person ruled by emotion will live like weather. Hot one day, cold the next, committed in the morning, detached by evening, brave when encouraged, weak when ignored. That is not power. That is instability. Think about a horse with great strength, but no reins. The problem is not that the horse lacks power. The problem is that the power has no guidance. Your emotions are powerful, but without discipline, they will drag you through ditches and call it freedom. Let that sink in. You do not master your life by eliminating feeling. You master your life by refusing to let feeling become your commander. Now consider how much of your suffering comes from mental exaggeration. The event happens once, but your mind keeps replaying it until it has lived in you for weeks. The insult is spoken in 10 seconds, but your mind builds a palace for it and invites it to stay. The setback is real, but then your thinking adds drama, prophecy, hopelessness, and self-accusation until the original problem becomes 10 times heavier. You have to learn to stop assisting your own pain. You have to learn to stop adding imagination to injury. That does not mean denial. It means proportion. It means clarity. It means refusing to let one bad hour become a verdict over your whole life. Think about a small spark landing in dry grass. If it is handled quickly, it stays small. If it is ignored, wind carries it. Then, what could have been extinguished with a boot must now be fought with engines, hoses, and exhaustion. That is how unchecked thoughts behave. They grow with delay. They spread with rehearsal. They deepen with neglect. Think about that. Mastering your mind often begins with learning not to feed what should have been confronted early. Now understand something important. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of power you possess. Where your attention goes, where your habits form, your future gathers shape. That is why distraction is not a small issue. It is not just a modern inconvenience. It is a thief. It steals your time, your depth, your concentration, your memory, your inner stillness. It keeps you skimming over life without ever gripping anything firmly enough to shape it. You keep telling yourself that a few wasted minutes do not matter. But lives are not only lost in dramatic collapses. Lives are leaked away in fragments, in scrolling, in postponing, in constant interruption, in mental fragmentation that becomes spiritual weakness. Think about a river split into too many shallow channels. It loses force. It spreads wide, but cannot cut deep. Your mind works the same way. If your attention is divided across 1,000 trivial pulls, you will have motion without impact. You will have activity without substance. Let that sink in. A mastered life requires a mastered attention. You must learn to place your mind where it can do real work and leave it there long enough to matter. Now let's talk about self-talk, because some of you are being verbally beaten every day by your own internal voice. You would never speak to a younger brother the way you speak to yourself. You would never train a student the way you tear yourself down. You call yourself weak before you have finished the fight. You call yourself a failure while you are still in the middle of learning. You call yourself hopeless because one chapter was hard. That is not humility. That is undisciplined language. There is a difference between honest correction and destructive contempt. Honest correction says this is wrong and it must change. Destructive contempt says, because this is wrong, you are worthless. One builds responsibility, the other builds paralysis. Think about a craftsman shaping wood. He does not smash the chair because one leg is uneven. He adjusts it, sands it, rebalances, corrects it with purpose. You need to speak to yourself that way, firmly, honestly, without self-pity, but also without self-hatred. Let that sink in. A mind cannot become strong in an atmosphere of constant internal abuse. It needs truth. It needs standards. It needs correction. But it also needs language that serves growth instead of strangling it. Now consider the discipline of mental replacement. It is not enough to reject one thought. You must replace it with something stronger. Empty space does not stay empty for long. If you remove bitterness but do not build gratitude, bitterness returns. If you remove distraction but do not build purpose, distraction returns. If you resist fear but do not plant truth, fear finds its way back. Many people try to master their minds through denial alone. They say, I will not think about that. I will not feel that. I will not go there. But the mind needs direction, not just restraint. Think about pulling weeds from a patch of soil and then walking away forever. What happens? The ground does not applaud your effort and remain clean. More weeds come. Better roots come back. The patch must be replanted if you want a different harvest. Your thinking works the same way. You do not only need to remove lies, you need to sow better thoughts, stronger thoughts, cleaner thoughts, truer thoughts. Think about that. Mastery is not merely saying no. Mastery is building something better in the place where chaos used to live. Now understand something important. What you repeatedly think about becomes easier to think about again. The mind develops grooves, patterns, pathways. If you rehearse anger every day, anger becomes quick. If you rehearse discipline every day, discipline becomes quicker. If you rehearse it every day, excuses become your native language. You are training your mind whether you mean to or not. You are rehearsing a future whether you admit it or not. That should sober you, because it means your thought life is not harmless background noise. It is construction. It is rehearsal. It is direction. Think about footsteps across a snowy field. The first path takes effort, but walk that same route enough times and a trail appears. Then the trail becomes easier than fresh ground. Your mind is like that field. The more often you send thought down one route, the more natural that route becomes. Let that sink in. If you keep walking the path of resentment, fear, lust, defeat, self-pity, and distraction, do not act surprised when those paths become your defaults. If you want a different life, you need to cut different trails, repeatedly, intentionally, patiently. Now let's talk about standards, because a strong mind is not built on preference. It is built on principle. Preference says, I will do it if I feel like it. Principle says, I will do it because it is right. Preference says, I will stay calm if the day is kind to me. Principle says, I will govern my reaction whether the day is kind or not. Preference is weak because preference changes with weather. Principle is durable because principle remains when convenience leaves the room. You need principles for your mind. Principles about what you will dwell on. principles about what you will not entertain, principles about how you will respond under pressure, principles about what gets your attention and what gets denied. Think about a train on tracks. The train may be powerful, but its movement is guided by fixed lines. Without tracks, the power becomes danger. Your mind needs tracks, not to imprison you, to carry you, to give power direction, to keep strength from turning wild. Think about that. Many people are not lacking intelligence. They are lacking rails. They have energy, emotion, ambition, opinion, but no settled principles to keep all that force moving somewhere useful. Now, consider what happens when your mind is governed by comparison. You stop living your life and start auditing everyone else's. You measure your worth by their pace. You measure your beauty by their image. You measure your success by their highlight. You measure your future by their current season. That is poison. Comparison does not clarify you. It confuses you. It makes you chase goals that are not yours and despise gifts you have not even developed. It makes gratitude shrink and insecurity grow. It makes discipline feel pointless because somebody else appears ahead. But you do not know their cost. You do not know their compromises. You do not know their private condition. You only know the angle they showed you. Think about a runner on a track who keeps twisting his head to watch the lane beside him. He loses form. He loses rhythm. He wastes energy. He may even drift out of his lane and disqualify himself. Your mental life works the same way. If your eyes are always on someone else, your own stride deteriorates. Let that sink in. A mastered mind learns to observe without envying, to appreciate without imitating blindly, and to stay faithful to its own assignment without becoming restless over someone else's timetable. Now understand something important. Boredom is not always your enemy. Sometimes boredom is the doorway to depth. You have been so trained by stimulation that stillness feels like starvation. You think if your mind is not entertained every few seconds, something is wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if your inner life is simply asking you to stay in one place long enough to think? What if boredom is the withdrawal symptom of a mind addicted to novelty? You do not become substantial by hopping from distraction to distraction. You become substantial by remaining with one truth long enough for it to sink roots into you. Think about a man drilling for water. If he digs 10 shallow holes, he stays thirsty. If he stays in one place and goes deep, eventually he finds something that can sustain him. That is the difference between a distracted mind and a disciplined one. One keeps moving and remains shallow. The other stays with the work and eventually reaches something life-giving. Think about that. Depth is rarely loud. Depth is rarely flashy. Depth is usually the reward of staying when your restless impulses keep begging you to leave. Now let's talk about fear, because fear is one of the most persuasive voices in an undisciplined mind. Fear can make caution look like wisdom when it is really avoidance. Fear can make delay look strategic when it is really cowardice. Fear can dress up retreat in the language of maturity. And because it speaks with urgency, many people obey it without examination. But fear is a poor master. It shrinks your world. It edits your courage. It convinces you that safety is the highest good, even when safety is slowly suffocating your calling, your growth, your strength. No one is coming to think brave thoughts for you. No one is coming to make you stand in the place you keep avoiding. No one is coming to rescue you from the prisons your own fear has built in your imagination. That is your work. Think about a smoke alarm with a weak battery. It starts sounding when there is no fire, startling the whole house. If you obey every false signal, you never live at peace. An undisciplined mind does that. It keeps alarming you over possibilities, interpretations, and scenarios that have not happened. Let that sink in. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the mind refusing to hand fear the steering wheel. Now consider resentment, because resentment is what happens when pain is left alone too long and starts shaping your interpretation of everything. You become suspicious of kindness. You become allergic to correction. You start assuming insult where none was intended. You carry old injuries into new rooms. and then act surprised when every conversation feels heavier than it should. Resentment is not strength. It is old pain wearing armor. It tells you it is protecting you, but really, it is hardening you in all the wrong places. It makes your mind rehearse the past until the past keeps stealing from the present. Think about rust on a blade. The metal is still there, but the edge is compromised. The tool that should be useful becomes difficult to trust because corrosion has gone unaddressed. That is what bitterness does to the mind. It eats at the edge. It dulls judgment. It turns force inward. Think about that. If you want to master your life, you must stop feeding the corrosion. You must learn to process hurt without making it your identity. Otherwise, the wound becomes your lens. And through that lens, everything looks like a threat, a betrayal, or a reason to pull back. Now understand something important. Your mind becomes stronger when your promises to yourself become more reliable. Self-respect is built through evidence, not speeches. Evidence. When you say you will wake up at a certain hour, and then you do it, your mind learns that your word has weight. When you say you will finish the task, and then you finish it, your mind learns that you can be trusted. When you say you will not go back to that destructive habit, and then you hold the line, your mind learns that discipline is possible. But every time you casually betray your own standards, you weaken your internal authority. You train yourself not to believe yourself. That is expensive. Think about a commander whose orders are never enforced. Eventually, the troops stop responding. Your own mind works that way. If every command is followed by negotiation, delay, excuse, and retreat, then your will loses credibility inside your own life. Let that sink in. Start making smaller promises if you must, but make them firm. Better a small standard kept than a dramatic vow broken by sunset. Reliability builds authority. Authority builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum, and momentum changes lives. Now let's talk about the body, because your mind does not float above your physical life untouched. A neglected body can become a noisy room the mind must keep working around. Sleep matters. Food matters. Movement matters. Rest matters. Order matters. You are not a machine. You are an integrated being. If your body is constantly overfed, underrested, underused, overstimulated, and ignored, your mind will feel the strain. That does not excuse mental weakness. It explains part of the battlefield. Some of you are trying to think clearly in a fog you helped create. Think about trying to read a map through a dirty windshield. Destination may be right, but visibility is compromised. Clean the glass. That is not everything, but it matters. It matters more than many people want to admit because disciplined living sounds less glamorous than emotional insight. But the practical things count. Go to bed. Drink water. Walk. Lift. Breathe. Sit in quiet. Turn the screen off. Let that sink in. Mastering your mind is not some mystical performance detached from ordinary responsibility. It often begins with the humble decision to stop living in a way that makes clarity harder than it needs to be. Now consider the role of solitude. If you never sit alone with your own thoughts, you will never really know who is driving your life. Solitude, it reveals what you crave, what you fear, what you avoid, what you worship, what you keep rehearsing. That is why so many people stay surrounded. Noise protects them from meeting themselves. But if you avoid solitude, you also avoid one of the great training grounds of mastery. In quiet, you can examine. In quiet, you can sort. In quiet, you can hear the difference between a deep conviction and a loud impulse. Think about muddy water in a shaken jar. When it is constantly agitated, you cannot see through it. Set it down. Leave it still. Over time, the dirt settles, and the water becomes clear enough to see through. Your mind often works like that. Constant agitation keeps everything mixed together. Solitude allows settling. It does not solve all problems, but it makes problems visible. Think about that. You do not always need more input. Sometimes you need less disturbance. Sometimes the next step becomes obvious only after you stop letting every voice in the world talk over the quiet voice of truth inside you. Now understand something important. You become what you repeatedly agree with. If you keep agreeing with weakness, weakness gains citizenship. If you keep agreeing with excuses, excuses become policy. If you keep agreeing with lust, bitterness, pettiness, avoidance, and vanity, those things start shaping your choices, like elected officials in the country of your life. You need to stop signing treaties with thoughts that mean to conquer you. Agreement is powerful. That is why you must choose carefully what you let become normal. Think about moisture slipping into a wall through a hairline crack. At first, there is no dramatic damage. Then the paint begins to bubble. Then the wood softens. Then the structure warps. Agreement with destructive thinking works like that. Quiet at first, expensive later. Let that sink in. Many of the battles in your life are not lost because the enemy was unbeatable. They are lost because you kept letting the enemy stay in the house unchallenged. Mastery begins with holy refusal. No, this thought does not stay. No, this fantasy does not get fed. No, this bitterness does not get a permanent seat. No, this excuse does not get to lead. That is how authority begins. Now let's talk about mental endurance, because life is not only won by intensity, it is won by consistency. Anyone can think clearly for 10 inspired minutes. Can you think clearly on the 5th hard day? Can you stay anchored in truth after a week of disappointment? Can you return your mind to order when emotion has been loud for hours? That is endurance. That is maturity. That is the kind of strength that actually holds a life together. Think about a lighthouse standing on a cliff through winter storms. It does not flash only when it feels dramatic. It keeps its beam turning because that is its purpose. Wind beats it, rain hits it, waves crash below it. Still it stands, still it shines. You need that kind of steadiness in your thought life. Not perfection, steadiness. The ability to return, the ability to recover, the ability to reset before disorder becomes identity. Think about that. A mastered mind is not a mind that never gets hit. It is a mind that knows how to regain its footing without surrendering the whole field. That is a great difference. And many people would change their lives if they simply learned how to return faster when their thinking starts to drift. Now consider the role of truth. Not your preferred truth. Not your comfortable truth. Truth, reality, facts, principles, consequences. A strong mind loves truth because truth liberates it from fantasy. Truth tells you where you really are, not where your pride wishes you were. Truth tells you what your habits are producing, not what your intentions hoped they would produce. Truth can sting, but truth is clean. It gives you solid ground to build on. Lies are soft at first and merciless later. Think about a house built on rotten boards, hidden beneath polished flooring. From above, it may still look fine. But the first serious weight exposes the deceit. A life built on self-deception works the same way. You can tell yourself you are disciplined because you intend to change. You can tell yourself you are kind because you avoid open cruelty. You can tell yourself you are serious while your habits laugh behind your back. Truth interrupts that nonsense. Let that sink in. If you want mastery, you must become a friend of truth. Not occasionally, regularly, ruthlessly, gratefully. Because a mind that refuses truth cannot lead a life worth trusting. Now understand something important. One of the marks of mental maturity is the ability to separate what you can control from what you cannot. Many people waste tremendous energy fighting realities outside their authority while neglecting the few things actually placed in their hands. You cannot control every opinion. You cannot control every delay. You cannot control every economy, every decision, every betrayal, every loss. But you can control your response. You can govern your attention. You can choose your words. You can order your habits. You can decide whether you will be ruled by panic or by principle. Think about a farmer standing under the sky. He cannot command the rain. He cannot order the seasons. He cannot bully the sun into rising earlier. But he can prepare the soil. He can plant. He can weed. He can protect what is his to steward. That is wisdom. Your life needs that same wisdom. Stop trying to command the weather of the world while neglecting the field of your own mind. Think about that. Power grows where responsibility is accepted. Helplessness grows where responsibility is abandoned in favor of complaint. Now let's talk about forgiveness of self in the proper sense, not the cheap kind that excuses everything. Proper self-forgiveness does not say your choices did not matter. They did. It does not say consequences are imaginary. They are not. Proper self-forgiveness says this: I will not chain my entire future to what I now have the power to learn from. That matters because shame can become another tyrant in the mind. Shame says, because you failed, you are finished. Shame says, because you fell, you are disqualified from rising. That is a lie. Failure must instruct you, not enthrone itself over you. Think about a man who stumbles climbing a mountain path. If he studies the misstep, adjusts, and keeps climbing, the fall becomes part of his education. If he sits down beside the rock and declares the journey over, the same fall becomes his master. Let that sink in. Mastering your mind means you do not romanticize failure, but neither do you build a shrine to it. You repent, you learn, you correct, you move. You do not make a permanent home out of a temporary collapse. Now consider how powerful imagination can be when it is disciplined. Undisciplined imagination creates disaster before it arrives. It imagines rejection, humiliation, catastrophe, shortage, abandonment. It turns maybe into certainly. It turns challenge into doom. But disciplined imagination can serve courage. It can help you see yourself acting with restraint, speaking with clarity, finishing with integrity, standing under pressure without breaking. The mind needs images. It rehearses by picture as well as by statement. Think about an architect before the building is raised. He sees lines before walls exist. He sees shape before steel is lifted. That vision guides the labor. Your inner life needs that kind of architecture. You need to picture the man or woman you are trying to become, not as fantasy, but as responsibility. Calm under pressure, clean in private, focused in work, steady in disappointment, disciplined in appetite, generous in spirit, sharp in judgment. Think about that. If all your imagination ever does is magnify what might go wrong, then your own mind becomes a projector of defeat. Discipline teaches imagination to become an instrument of construction instead. Now understand something important. Not all mental noise is dramatic. Some of it is subtle. It sounds like delay. It sounds like, I will start tomorrow. It sounds like, this one time will not matter. It sounds like, I deserve a break from the standard I said I wanted. It sounds like, no one will know. Those quiet negotiations have wrecked more lives than open rebellion, because open rebellion at least announces itself. Negotiation comes dressed like reasonableness. It whispers instead of shouting. It smiles while it steals. Think about termites in a beam. There is no thunder, no explosion, no warning siren. Just quiet, eating from the inside until the structure that looked strong suddenly fails under weight. Mental compromise works like that. A little tolerated indulgence, a little lowered standard, a little repeated avoidance. Then later you wonder why your confidence feels thin and your discipline feels weak. Let that sink in. Strength is not only lost in obvious collapses. It is eroded in private permissions. Mastery requires vigilance over the small permissions that gradually redesign your character without your consent. Now let's talk about speech, because the mastered mind eventually shows up in the mastered mouth. If your mind is undisciplined, your words will betray it. You will overshare from emotion. You will promise from impulse. You will wound from irritation. You will defend from insecurity. You will boast from hunger. But when the mind becomes ordered, the mouth becomes more trustworthy. You begin to speak after thinking, not instead of thinking. You begin to ask whether the truth you want to say is timely, necessary, constructive, and clean. Think about a faucet connected to a reservoir. If the reservoir is polluted, the water from the tap tells the story. Your speech tells the story of your mind. Listen to yourself. Not just what you say in public, but what you say when anger rises, when disappointment hits, when someone confronts you, when you are tired, when you are not admired. That is where the real condition often leaks out. Think about that. If you want to master your life, Pay attention to your words, because words expose thought patterns, and thought patterns expose the architecture of the inner life. The mouth often reveals what the mind has been feeding on in secret. Now, consider what becomes possible when your mind starts to come under real discipline. You become less reactive, less needy for praise, less vulnerable to distraction, less likely to turn a difficult hour into a dramatic identity. You gain space between stimulus and response. And in that space, power begins to live. Because power is not merely force. Power is choice, the ability to pause, the ability to evaluate, the ability to answer instead of merely react. Think about a skilled archer drawing the string. He does not release the arrow the instant tension appears. He steadies, he aligns, he chooses the moment. That pause is not weakness, it is control. Your life needs more of that pause, more of that measured response, more of that internal command. No one is coming to hand that to you. No one is coming to force you into maturity every time pressure rises. You must practice it, day after day, thought after thought. Let that sink in. The mastered life is not built in one heroic decision. It is built in thousands of moments where you choose not to let your first impulse become your final action. Now, understand something important. If you master your mind, you will not become flawless. You will become governable. And governable people can keep growing. They can be corrected without crumbling. They can be delayed without disintegrating. They can face pressure without becoming strangers to their own values. That matters more than polish. That matters more than image. Because life will test what governs you. Success will test it. Failure will test it. Attention will test it. Loneliness will test it. And when those tests come, borrowed motivation will not be enough. You will need internal government. Think about a city with strong walls and ordered gates. Trade can come in. People can move. Life can flourish. But there is structure. There is discernment. There is defense. Your mind must become like that city. Open enough to learn. Strong enough to resist. Ordered enough to function under pressure. Think about that. The goal is not to become cold, numb, or unreachable. The goal is to become stable enough that your gifts, your relationships, your work, and your purpose are not constantly threatened by internal disorder. Now let's talk about the middle of the battle, because that is where many people lose heart. At the beginning, truth feels exciting. You make a new decision. You clear the table. You write the plan. You feel strong. But then the old thought patterns return. The old cravings return. The old fears tap on the door again. And because you expected instant transformation, you start saying, nothing is changing. Be careful. Repetition does not mean failure. Resistance does not mean the work is fake. The fact that the battle continues does not mean progress is absent. It means training is underway. Master your mind, master your life. Return to that line here in the middle where enthusiasm has cooled and discipline must take over. Think about learning to play an instrument. At first, your fingers feel clumsy. The notes buzz. The rhythm stumbles. But you do not throw the instrument away because the early songs sound rough. You keep practicing. Accuracy grows through repetition. Your inner life is no different. Let that sink in. You must stop demanding instant fluency in disciplines you have barely begun to rehearse. Stay with the process. Stay with the correction. Stay with the practice until strength becomes more natural than surrender. Now consider your environment. It matters. Not because environment is destiny, but because environment can either support discipline or constantly undermine it. Some rooms feed your best self. Others keep inviting your worst self back to the table. Some voices sharpen you. Others keep dulling you with permission to remain weak. Some habits are easier to break when the triggers around them are changed. Wisdom understands this. Wisdom does not brag about resisting poison while keeping it in the cupboard. Think about a fire carefully built in a hearth. It gives warmth because it is contained. Scatter those same flames across dry wood, paper, and curtain, and what was useful becomes destructive. Your environment is part of the containment, part of the guidance, part of the design. Think about that. If you want a mastered mind, build a life that helps you practice mastery. Clean spaces, good books, strong company, clear routines, honest conversations, limited noise, chosen inputs. Discipline loves structure. Weakness loves vagueness. If you keep everything loose, blurry, and undefined, do not be surprised when your mind keeps wandering back toward chaos. Now understand something important. There are seasons when mastering your mind will feel lonely because fewer people are willing to do this work than talk about it. Plenty of people love the language of growth. Fewer love the cost of growth. Plenty love the appearance of peace. Fewer love the discipline required for peace. Plenty love results. Fewer love repetition. You may have to walk differently from people around you. You may have to say no to what they call harmless. You may have to protect your focus when others mock restraint as extremism. Let that sink in. Not everyone will understand why you guard your thoughts, your inputs, your schedule, your speech, your habits so carefully. That is all right. You are not trying to impress spectators. You are trying to build a life that can hold weight. Think about a bridge being reinforced before a heavy load passes over it. The extra steel may look unnecessary to people who only admire the view. But the engineer is not designing for decoration. He is designing for pressure. Mastering your mind is like that reinforcement. It may seem excessive to shallow observers, but when real burden comes, strength will prove its own wisdom. Now let's talk about peace, because peace is not laziness, and it is not escape. Peace is order. Peace is strength under control. Peace is a mind that does not have to chase every noise, because it has learned where to stand. People keep searching for peace in changing circumstances, while refusing to discipline the inner world that keeps manufacturing unrest. That approach does not work. You can vacation in beautiful places and bring your turmoil with you. You can sit in a silent room and still be internally screaming. Peace is not found merely by changing scenery. Peace is cultivated by training thought, expectation, desire, and response. Think about a deep lake early in the morning. The surface may ripple with a breeze, but below there is stillness, weight, and depth. That is the kind of peace you need. Not surface calm dependent on perfect conditions, but rooted steadiness that remains even when weather changes. Think about that. A mastered mind does not mean you never feel stress. It means stress no longer has the authority to define your whole interior landscape. There is something deeper holding you, something trained, something settled, something governed. Now consider the future. The future is not built when you arrive there. It is built now in thought before form, in discipline before reward, in mental order before visible success. The future version of you is being assembled in sentences you repeat, in impulses you resist, in standards you keep when no one applauds. You are building someone every day. Either someone weaker, more impulsive, more distracted, more fragile, or someone steadier, sharper, cleaner, more trustworthy. Think about a blacksmith shaping steel. Fire, hammer, cooling, fire again. The process is not gentle, but it is purposeful. The metal that resists discipline remains soft in the wrong ways and brittle in the wrong moments. The metal that endures shaping becomes useful. Your mind must be forged. Your reactions must be forged. Your focus must be forged. Let that sink in. You do not become a trustworthy human being by accident. You become one because you decided that your inner life would no longer remain a lawless country. You chose government over chaos, principle over impulse, responsibility over excuse, and over time, that choice begins to show up in everything. Now understand something important. There will come a day when the life you now admire in others will be required of you. Calm will be required. Leadership will be required. Restraint will be required. Clarity will be required. And on that day, you will not rise to the level of what you posted, wished for, or envied. You will fall to the level of what you practiced. That is why mental discipline matters so much. It is preparation. Quiet preparation. Repeated preparation. Real preparation. Think about a pilot in turbulence. He does not become calm because the passengers are nervous. He becomes calm because calm was trained before takeoff. Procedures were repeated. Responses were rehearsed. Instruments were understood. Your life needs that same preparation. There will be turbulence. The question is not whether you can avoid all of it. The question is whether your mind will become an ally or an accomplice to panic when it comes. Think about that. Mastering your mind is not a luxury for people with easy lives. It is a necessity for anyone who intends to live with purpose under pressure. Now let's bring this to the point where it belongs. Master your mind, master your life. If your thoughts are undisciplined, your days will eventually reveal it. If your attention is scattered, your future will bear the mark. If your emotions rule, your peace will stay fragile. But if you learn to govern your inner world, even imperfectly, steadily, honestly, you will begin to see everything change. Your work will change because your focus changes. Your relationships will change because your reactions change. Your confidence will change because your promises to yourself become more reliable. Your peace will change because truth becomes more familiar than panic. Your future will change because your habits stop working against your goals. So start now. Guard the gate. Challenge the lie. Replace the poison. Keep the promise. Hold the standard. Return when you drift. Stand up when you fall. Think clearly. Speak carefully. Live deliberately. And remember this near the end as strongly as you heard it at the beginning. Master your mind. Master your life. Not someday. Not when conditions are easier. Now. Because the life you want will only ever rise as high as the mind you are willing to train.